Hello, and welcome to Missouri Law Matters, a new podcast all about your Missouri court system. My name is Matt Hamner, and I'm your host for today. I want to thank you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please like and follow us on all your various podcast apps, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to our channel. We're also hopeful that we're going to have these podcasts available in both audio and video format on YouTube. So please like and subscribe us there as well. Also, don't forget to follow the Missouri Supreme Court on all of their various social media pages, including Facebook, Instagram. I want to thank you all for tuning into this podcast today. We have an incredible guest for you. It is my honor at this time to be joined by one of the 7 judges on our Missouri Supreme Court, the Honorable Kelly Broniec. Judge Broniec, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Judge Broniec, you are a new appointment to the Supreme Court here within the last year or so. Tell us how it's been. I'm sure life's been a little bit of a whirlwind the last year or so.
It certainly has, but it's been great. It's truly just such an honor to serve on the court, and it's been interesting every day to see how the court operates, both administratively and through our court dockets and cases, and how we accept cases, and just all of the work we do through the committees administering the court statewide.
Excellent. And Judge, I know you've got a lengthy history in the legal system as far as working in various roles, and I want to talk to you about all that today. But I want to kind of start at the beginning. I know you grew up in the mid-Missouri area, or what I would call the mid-Missouri area. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of how you got started.
Well, I grew up in Warrenton, Missouri, which is a little bit outside of St. Louis. And it was a really small town when I grew up there when I was young. It's grown a bit over my lifetime. But then in 1999, I moved to Montgomery County, and I've lived there ever since. So a little bit smaller, a little bit more like Warrenton was when I grew up.
And for folks who may not know where Montgomery County is, what towns are there in Montgomery County?
Yeah.
Where would they find that?
Montgomery City, and we are halfway between St. Louis and Columbia along Interstate 70. So not too far from Herman, also for those listeners who like to go to Herman for wine country.
Excellent. And Warren County, Warrenton is in Warren County, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Hence the name, of course.
We keep it simple.
While we're talking about Warrenton, I just had to give a shout out to the Warren County Fair because I attended the Warren County Fair on several occasions to see some of the incredible musical acts that they had lined up for the fair. So kudos to Warren County. They always put on a really great fair.
And Montgomery County too. Both counties are good about having a local family-oriented fair with good music as well.
Got to get to the Montgomery County Fair. I have not made that one yet, but it's certainly going to be on my list now.
Great.
Judge Broniec, did you go to high school in the Warrenton area or did you go in Montgomery City?
I went to high school in Warrenton, Warren County R3 High School.
Excellent. And when you graduated high school, was law something that was on your mind when you graduated, or did you come to that later?
No, not at all. I did not decide to go to law school until after I took business law in college towards my business degree. So it was just one of those general education requirements, and ended up really liking business law. So that kind of got my interest in the legal profession started, took more classes in the legal studies department. I was at William Woods College in Fulton, so they had the legal studies department as well. And so I was able to take some more classes in that department and ended up deciding to go to law school.
What were you hoping to do in business before you decided to pivot to law?
I honestly didn't really know. I just thought it would be a good degree where you could use it on a wide variety of professions and tasks. So I originally was a fashion merchandising major and then decided to get a general business degree. I thought that might be a little bit more versatile after graduating, and then ended up really falling into love with the law.
That's excellent. Did you have any lawyers in your family or other professionals that you knew that kind of did that? Or was this just something you stumbled into due to a college class?
It was truly something I stumbled into through taking that class towards my business degree. And honestly, I thought I would get my legal studies degree and maybe be a paralegal or something like that. And it was one of my professors that encouraged me to go to law school.
That's really cool. I'm always fascinated with people's path to the law because what I find is everybody's story is always different. There are those people that from almost birth decided that they wanted to be lawyers, their parents were lawyers and whatever. And then there are those people that got all the way through college and maybe even a couple years out of college and decided that, I think I've decided I want to be a lawyer. So it's always fascinating. We have so many people in this profession that come to it from all sorts of backgrounds and have all sorts of different paths to get here. Truly, if you have an interest in the law and if you have a passion in the law, you can end up in this profession from basically anywhere.
Well, I totally agree with you, Matt. And, when I first decided to go to law school, I thought, I'm going to, get my law degree and be a corporate lawyer in the city. But then I, applied for and obtained a summer internship with the local prosecutor's office in Warren County and fell in love with criminal law as well. And so then I ended up deciding to stay in a local office, small town in Warren County, and serve as a prosecuting attorney.
And that path is certainly an interesting one that you have guided. When you first graduate from law school, you come out of school and your first job out is private practice, right?
I was in private practice, but I was also a part-time assistant prosecuting attorney. And so in these smaller rural counties, most of them, especially at that time, were considered part-time prosecuting attorneys. And so it didn't mean that you only worked part-time. It just meant that you could have a private practice in addition to your prosecutor duties. And so the elected prosecutor was Mike Wright, and he had a private practice. And so I was in private practice with him and also his assistant prosecuting attorney for Warren County. So trying to do two things at once.
And talk a little bit about that, because that's really interesting how, particularly in a small town, in a small community like that, how do you juggle having to wear the two hats at the same time, being both an assistant prosecuting attorney who's enforcing criminal laws and maybe, putting people in jail and doing things like that, and balancing that with representing people in civil cases and helping them solve their problems there?
Well, it was hard, obviously, because the county was growing, and so the criminal dockets were growing as well. And so we were really busy in the prosecutor's office, and later it became a full-time position. The voters in the county voted to make it a full-time position. It deserved to be that for a long time. So, you're trying to juggle the different schedules, different dockets for your private practice and your prosecutor's position. And, you really have to screen clients for conflicts and things like that. So it makes for a pretty busy office going back and forth. And the other thing is that, unfortunately, every time you're in the prosecutor's office, you had clients thinking that you weren't in your private office enough. And if you're in the private office, you have people needing you in the prosecutor's office. And so we tried to balance that out by having both offices in the same office. In the beginning, we didn't have a separate prosecutor's office and a separate private practice office because the courthouse wasn't big enough to house us anyway. Eventually, the courthouse was rebuilt and we did have separate offices. So then you're, going back and forth. So it takes a lot of schedule coordination as well.
Right. And I know that there are some people who are listening who maybe live in larger communities and have larger legal circles and larger courthouses and things like that. This is completely normal in small towns and completely normal in small communities where you have one lawyer who handles all the estates and trusts and also prosecutes the cases, and he may even be judge on other days too. So it is not uncommon for the limited legal resources in the community for the lawyers, whoever they may be, to wear several hats.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
So when you were doing some private work, I assume as a small town practice, was there something particularly that you specialized in or just kind of whatever they needed?
It really was doing things like wills because you could schedule the appointments around your other dockets and things like that. So I also served as a guardian ad litem in some cases. You have to be careful about even doing those things because it could turn into a conflict with a criminal case that you have pending. So
from this time that you were working in private practice, what skills do you think that you developed that have really benefited you since you've become a judge and been on the bench?
I think in both private practice and as a prosecutor, you develop compassion for the people that you're serving. I think that was a big thing, that you see your clients in your private practice having a need and you're trying to help them address the needs that they have. And then crime victims in the prosecutor's office, or mothers or fathers trying to collect child support against an absent parent. And so, you really you hear their stories, and you can't help but be compelled and feel like, that you want to help.
That's absolutely right. And as lawyers, certainly our goal is always to help the people that we can, and as many people as we can. You mentioned that you did transition from private practice to actually doing prosecuting full time. Tell me a little bit about that. How did that come about? When did that happen?
I was an assistant prosecutor in Warren County. I actually served as an assistant prosecutor when I was Rule 13 certified as well for a couple of years after I graduated from law school and passed the bar exam. Then I ended up transferring to the Lincoln County Prosecutor's Office and worked there for a year as a full-time assistant prosecuting attorney. And then the elected prosecutor in Montgomery County resigned 8 months into a 4-year term. And so that was in the same circuit as Warren County, where I grew up. And I loved the circuit that I grew up in as a young professional. But that was enticing for me to get back to the 12th Circuit. So I applied for the governor's appointment for the Montgomery County prosecuting attorney position and received the appointment, moved to Montgomery County, and then served as the elected prosecutor there for 7 years. In Montgomery County, it was smaller even than Warren County, so I was back to a part-time position again. When I moved to Montgomery County and became the prosecuting attorney, I decided that job needed full-time work, and so I elected not to have a private practice so that I could dedicate full-time to getting the job done there in Montgomery County.
And making that transition to being the appointed prosecutor in a county, and even though it was paid as a part-time position, I know that even if we call it a part-time position, that it takes up all of your time. It takes up a lot of time to handle those types of cases. What was that transition like? What did you have to change in the way that you were approaching cases, or you approached your schedule and your life in dealing with going to full-time being a prosecutor as opposed to also having private practice?
I had more administrative responsibilities with the county commissions, with the chiefs of police, the sheriff, the highway patrol. But they were all really wonderful because I think that they were really looking forward to working with a prosecutor that would do the job full time. Everybody was just really great in the legal system and community in Montgomery County when I moved there and started practicing there. And the other thing was, you're handling everything from a traffic ticket, from the most minor traffic ticket up to homicides or some really serious cases, domestic violence cases and things. So you're setting policy and expectations for your community, but also for the law enforcement officers in the community as well. And I just can't say how great it was to work with the law enforcement and help them see how standard policies in certain case types were so important. And things like generally not dismissing cases, domestic violence cases, and not putting the victim in that quandary of whether or not the case would proceed was so important. And so things like that we learned together. It was also during the time of all the methamphetamine laboratories and stealing anhydrous ammonia. And so we were really busy with drug cases and the anhydrous ammonia cases at that time as well. So I was learning about the methamphetamine trade and all of the various ways to manufacture methamphetamine and things like that. And so it was always interesting.
No doubt. And I really appreciate hearing you talking about the cooperation that you were able to have with law enforcement, with your county commissions and such, because, that is such a key and something that is so vital to law enforcement in general, because, the police do their job, but they have to work with the prosecutor's office who have to do their job, and they need the police to help them. And it's all this thing. And particularly in a small county like yours, you're also dealing with the issue of limited resources. There's only so much money that can go around to go to law enforcement, to go to jails, to go to the prosecutor's office. And so it's not only trying to figure out the best path forward in these various entities, but it's also about trying to share what limited resources you have and apply those in the best way that you can. And certainly in small counties like like that one, and I'm sure it was the same in yours. That can be a struggle sometimes, figuring out how to allocate those resources to best help the community.
It really can. And, everybody's wanting to do the best they can. And the county commission, they want to provide resources. But at the end of the day, they only have so much. And so it's setting reasonable expectations that everybody can get behind and work together to accomplish your goals at the end of the day.
Well, and you remained a prosecutor for some time, but that's not where you stayed in Montgomery County. Tell me a little bit about what the next step was.
Many people will know that Roy Richter was the Associate Circuit Judge in Montgomery County for many, many years. And then in 2006, the end of 2006, he was appointed by the governor to the Court of Appeals for the Eastern District. And so when that happened, I decided that I wanted to run for Associate Circuit Judge. And so I did. At that time, there were 3 of us that were interested in that position in Montgomery County. So the governor's office had decided that they would not make an appointment. They'd wait for the results of the primary election and then make an appointment. So Montgomery County went for about 8 months without an associate circuit judge. We had judges coming in from other counties and senior judges coming in. But eventually I won the primary in August and was appointed in the next day by the governor and took office as an associate circuit judge. So that was in August of 2006. So I served there as Associate Circuit Judge in Montgomery County from August of 2006 until October of 2020.
Now, when did being a judge kind of pop up on your radar? You've been in the civil practice, you had been work as a prosecutor. When did maybe being a judge pop into your mind? When did that become something you were interested in?
I think that for quite a while, working as an assistant prosecuting attorney and the prosecuting attorney and having the private practice, I was in the courtroom a lot. I mean, like several times a week. And so, obviously judges are in courtrooms a lot. And so I enjoyed getting to go to court and having the dockets that we had, whether it was call dockets or trials. And so that was always something that was kind of in the back of my mind. So that was one thing when I applied for the prosecuting attorney's position that was in my mind as well, that it was going to be a long-term commitment to Montgomery County and, that would be my new home. And I had always hoped that I would be lucky enough or fortunate enough to be an associate circuit judge there.
So having been a prosecutor in that county, having done some civil practice in the neighboring county in Warren County, how was the transition to now becoming the judge in this process? Again, going back to the fact that this is a small community, that a lot of the people that you're probably seeing for the bench are people that you've seen in other legal scenarios throughout your career. How was that? How did we balance all that? How'd you figure all that out?
Great, because Judge Richter was always a mentor for me. So he was helpful, but the other judges in the circuit were very helpful too. Linda Hamlet was an associate circuit judge up in Audrain County, and she was always helpful. Even as the prosecuting attorney on my own, 3 years out of law school in Montgomery County, or as the judge, I always knew I had people to call if I had questions or dilemmas. So that was great. We had great clerks in the clerk's office as well. And so they were always, very helpful. But then also learning newer areas of the law that I hadn't, practiced in before. I became the associate circuit judge. I took over the juvenile docket for 2 of the 3 counties right away, and then transitioned into taking over the 3rd county as well. I had juvenile judges I could call and ask, but we also had a great chief juvenile officer. I just think that having really good people around you is really a benefit and a luxury, and something I always be thankful for. And in all these positions, I've had really good people around me to work.
And all the guests that we've had on this podcast so far have all talked around the same topic about how important it was to them as a young attorney and coming through the system, about having mentors, about having those people that you can look up to, that can offer you guidance, that can answer questions for you and can help kind of shape you and guide you on your path through the system. I think in the legal profession, as much as any other profession, it's so important to have people to help you find your path and find your way through the legal system. We do not brag on enough all of the incredible people that work in our system and who help us out as judges on a day-to-day basis and basically make us look good.
Absolutely.
And part of the reason that we started this podcast and these efforts is to try to highlight some of the folks that do such incredible work and have done so much for the people of the state of Missouri that they don't even know about. And so I appreciate you giving them a shout out, because certainly I know as a former trial judge myself that there is no way that I could have done what I did without the incredible work of all the people around me.
Absolutely, hands down. And everybody puts in 100% effort. And I don't even think people realize how many people we have in our local courts that are putting in all this extra time on committees, and they don't even realize they have those folks in their local communities working hard every day and how many hours they put in to do it.
We are so grateful for all those people who work in the court system who help keep things running. We can't express our appreciation enough, and we'll continue to do that here on this podcast for sure.
Great. Absolutely.
Now, how long were you an associate circuit judge there?
14 years.
14 years.
Now flew by, I have to say.
Now, during that entire 14-year period, you mentioned handling juvenile docket. Was it primarily juvenile? Did you kind of move things around? Did you handle all sorts of different stuff, or what primarily were you doing?
A little bit of everything, like most associate circuit judges. So you have your associate circuit dockets of criminal and traffic and civil states and probate. But then I would also handle dockets for protection orders and paternity and some dissolutions, a lot of uncontested dissolutions, some contested and paternities. But then I also had the entire juvenile docket for the circuit. And then I would take special assignments in the other counties. I do conflicts for the other judges in the other counties in the circuit, and they came and handled my conflicts. So we'd set up what we called swap dockets. So the same day, Judge Hamlet would come to Montgomery County and handle my conflicts, and I'd go to Audrain and handle her conflicts. So it was truly a little bit of everything.
And that was certainly always one of the things that really excited me about being a trial judge, was never knowing when I walked through the door each day what the heck I was going to see. You just never knew what was going to happen when you walk into a courtroom. And some people really find that fascinating, like me and you. And I know other people that would scare them to death.
Yes, it was really nice. One day, I had a variety of civil cases on the docket, and I had some set at 9, and then I had associate civil, and I had some probate matters on the docket, and then I had some paternity and protection orders at 10 o'clock and different things. And one lawyer came up and took care of his matter and went to turn around and leave. And he came back, he said, "Can I say something?" And I was like, "Well, sure, go ahead." He's like, "You have just skipped from this topic to this topic to this topic." And he said, "That's really amazing." I'm like, "Well, it's just another Tuesday in Montgomery County," because I think we're all used to that. So it wasn't anything special. In the rural communities, that's just how we have to do it.
Yeah, you got to be prepared to handle whatever walks through the door. And certainly, I know you did a great job as associate judge there. So
I don't know if I did. I tried.
Oh, I know you did. I know you did. But you were a prosecuting attorney. Then you were associate circuit judge for 14 years. Then at some point you decided you wanted to be an appellate judge. How did you come to that realization? And talk to me about how that process went.
We've talked about mentors, and Judge Richter certainly was one of mine. And I was so happy to be on the trial court, and I loved it. And I thought I would always remain there. But eventually, having those conversations with Judge Richter and other judges, I started thinking, well, I am interested in applying for the Court of Appeals. And so I did, and I made it. And as luck would have it, it just happened to be for Judge Richter's seat when he aged out and had to retire when he turned 70. So there was, as they say, a little bit of poetry in that as well.
Well, it's always exciting to be able to follow in the footsteps of somebody that you really admire. And I know that you have really enjoyed being able to work with Judge Richter over these years. And certainly I know Judge Richter too as well, not nearly as well as you do, but he is a wonderful man and an even better judge. And we've missed him on the bench, but certainly you being able to be elevated into that spot was I know, something that he was excited about. Certainly I know it's something that worked out well for us. Now, you joined the Eastern District Court of Appeals. What was that transition like? You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but you go from a busy associate docket where you're handling everything that walks through the door and all different types of things and kind of running around and putting out fires, to working at a very busy appellate court where
Yes.
maybe you don't have quite as many fires that you have to stomp out on a daily basis.
And we were in the thick of the COVID shutdowns as well. So it was very, very different. So, like you said, you go from the busy associate circuit docket, and then you go to the Court of Appeals where you do have the luxury of time and preparing for your cases and deciding them and writing the opinions. It was different because I went from having hundreds of cases on the docket to having maybe upwards of 20 cases a month for the panel I was sitting on. So that was different. But also I had law clerks, which was a great thing that is a huge benefit that you don't have in the trial courts unless you're in one of the larger jurisdictions. So that was a nice thing to have law clerks to talk about the cases with and bounce ideas off of. They obviously help us with the research. But when I started at the Eastern District, we literally were still pretty much shut down from COVID. And so I was working remotely and our dockets were even remote. And so oral arguments were on WebEx. And so it took a while to really get acclimated to that new position.
After that kind of weird time to be transitioning into a new job during the height of the pandemic, when all this weirdness was going on and we were doing all these things a different way than we'd ever done them before.
Yes.
How long did it take once we came out of all of that for you to feel comfortable and feel like you got back in a rhythm?
It took quite a while because I went on in October of 2020, and then it was August of 2021 before we started having in-person oral arguments again. So I would say it took a year really to get adjusted to not only performing a different job function, but also to get in a new routine and see how that was changing as the stages of the pandemic progressed as well.
Well, ultimately, you did adjust, and you were on the Eastern District for several years and did an outstanding job. As always, openings on the Missouri Supreme Court become available. And at some point, you decide that you want to apply for that, potentially become a judge on our Missouri Supreme Court. What was kind of your thought process there? What led you to that path?
I had some people encourage me to apply. And as you know, that was at a time when we had 2 vacancies within a relatively short amount of time. And so I thought, well, why not? I still felt like I had a great job at the Eastern District and would have been perfectly happy staying there had it not worked out for me to come to the Supreme Court. But I just really felt like I had nothing to lose by applying.
And then Governor Parson, of course, appointed you to the job as a Supreme Court judge. You've been doing that job for over a year now. Coming from a trial bench and then an appellate bench on an intermediate appellate court, what's been the biggest thing that's been a surprise to you in taking this new job with the Supreme Court?
So one of the biggest surprises is that it seems like the schedule is more like being back in the trial court. I knew it was going to be busier and, a lot more administrative work and more public engagements and things like that. And so I wanted that part of the job. But I think that's the one thing that when I say to people, well, it's more like being back at the trial court, that people are surprised at. Not in terms of our dockets or the number of cases or anything like that, but just in terms of kind of the schedule. And sometimes every day is very different. So I enjoy that.
I think a lot of people don't realize that our judges on our Missouri Supreme Court, in addition to all of the really big, complicated, important cases that they end up having to deal with and hearing arguments on and writing opinions on, they're also really ambassadors for our bar and for the judiciary itself. And you all spend a great deal of your time whenever you're not working on opinions and hearing cases. You spend a great deal of time traveling around the state, appearing at functions and talking to people and presenting and doing a lot of the work that this podcast is designed to try to do, which is talk to people and educate them about who we are and how we do the stuff that we do. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And so I very much appreciate you kind of giving them a window into that, all this additional work that goes into your job.
Absolutely. And that's something that we enjoy. Sometimes local bar associations invite us, or treatment courts will invite us to cut if they're having an anniversary or something like that. But honestly, I think probably, not a lot of areas of the state think, oh, if I invite the Supreme Court, they might actually come. And we do. So we want to get those invitations. And if at all possible, one of us will try to be there, one or more. It just depends on what our schedules are. We encourage the invitations and we like to be involved in the legal community and get out into the local communities. And, of course, probably a lot of people listening to the podcast are aware of our Chief Justice has been out visiting every circuit last year and this year, trying to thank all of our workers who work so hard in our trial courts every day. And they've gone through a lot. They've had some big responsibilities these last few years with all the expungements and the COVID restrictions and then redaction. And so, she's really been out in the trial courts thanking all of our workers for doing the great job that they do. And so, we want to do that in a number of ways. So it's also getting out to bar events and things like that too.
That's excellent. And we always are appreciative when the judges that represent us and do such good work are also such good representatives for our profession and give back to the community. That's so very important. Speaking of which, I know you are involved in a lot of community activities. I know your job is very busy. You travel all over the place now as a Supreme Court judge, meeting with people. What outlets can you find to still find time to give back to your community, to take those steps, to be engaged and be involved?
I'm not able to make as many meetings anymore since I'm in Jeff City every day, but still try to make it to our events. Also try to stay involved at my church and the activities that we have. And then, of course, trying to get to visit with my daughters when they have time as well, because they're very busy. Also.
It seems everyone is just getting busier and busier these days. So when you aren't running around and working and doing all this stuff, what do you do for fun? What do you do to relax, to put all the stress of the job behind you?
Now that our daughters are older and we get to actually hang out with some of our friends, so we're enjoying those evening dinners and evenings on the patios. We follow sports as well. We like to follow basketball, and my husband and one of my daughters are also big football fans. And so we just keep busy with friends and family and sporting events.
That's excellent. Judge Broniec, if I had a DeLorean, if I had a time machine and I could take you today back to the mid-90s when a young Kelly Broniec is graduating from law school and you could tell her, hang in there, you're going to be a Supreme Court justice on the Missouri Supreme Court, what do you think she would have said?
I don't think she would have believed it. I don't think she'd believe it. Law students typically would think to be on the Supreme Court, you have to be on law review and you have to be first in your class and you have to go to the biggest law firm or you have to, do these great big things. So I saw myself as being more reserved and wanting to do my thing in my local community. I just would not have believed it if you would have told me back then, that I would end up here.
Well, we're certainly very glad that you did. I know how busy you are. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you took the time to join us today to talk. I have one last question for you that I'm asking everybody. What's the best thing that you've seen lately? It can be a movie or a TV show or a concert or a sporting event, or what's the best thing you've seen lately? It's a podcast. Take all the time you need.
Okay. I don't tend to watch a lot of TV. One thing I saw, and it's been a while ago, but we watched this show on investigation and discovery. There's a homicide detective named Joe Kinda out in Colorado Springs, and in each of the episodes, he talks through a case that he had. In his final episode, he and his wife both talked about when he retired and that he had not realized as he went through his profession the amount of stress and PTSD he was experiencing from everything he had witnessed in his career and the horrible things he had seen. So when he retired and they approached him about doing that show, he thought, oh, I don't want to do that. But he and his wife both talked about how talking about it, doing the shows and talking through the things he had experienced really seemed to help him deal with that PTSD that he was experiencing from his profession. One of the funniest things was at the end of the show, they showed him performing his new profession, which was as a school bus driver. which I thought was really ironic because my husband had also retired from the highway patrol a little over 3 years ago and is now also driving a school bus. And so that was a fun analogy. But I also thought, what a great way to reach out to people who suffer some secondary trauma from their professions, and the importance of talking about it in some way, expressing or dealing with the trauma that many of our court workers experience occasionally or sometimes more routinely, depending on where you're at. I think that that also fits in with the theme that the Missouri Bar and our Chief Justice are using in recent times about lawyers and the importance of reaching out for help if you need it. And there's no shame in that. I used to tell my kids that in juvenile court as well. And there's no shame in reaching out for help if you need it. And take care of yourselves. Let people know if you're experiencing some trauma or depression, anxiety, substance abuse as a result of stress from your job or home life or whatever it is. But do reach out.
You know, we've become really attuned in the last couple of years to talk about mental health. It's become more of a topic of conversation. We all talk about this mental health crisis and all these things. And I think one of the things that people don't realize when they deal with that is something that you've hit on, is that we are all subjected to a lot of trauma that we don't even realize we're subjected
Yes.
to.
Yes.
And particularly in this business, particularly you having been a former prosecutor, having been a former trial judge, I think what people even who work in the profession don't realize is every time you have experience with a case like that, whether you handle it, whether you're just sitting in the courtroom when it's discussed, whether you sit through the trial of it, you take little pieces of that with you. And those little pieces of that trauma, you carry them with you. And so you carry them with you.
Jurors, jurors experience the same thing. And so, you take that with you when you leave in the evenings. And so to your point earlier, asking, what do you do to enjoy your life? So all of those things are important.
Well, Judge Broniec, again, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us today. I have truly enjoyed getting to talk to you, and I hope that you have enjoyed the experience.
I have. Thank you, Judge Hamner. It's great to talk to you today.
I want to thank everybody else who has listened to our episode today. Please keep your eyes on this space for our next episode that will be coming out soon. Don't forget again, like and subscribe us on your podcast platforms of choice. Also follow us on our social medias, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all those various places where you can find us. With nothing else further for us to add today, at this time, this podcast will be adjourned. Thank you so much.